commercials. Because the ratings are sagging, they're going to try to push that up to 16 commercials per hour. So you only get 1 or 2 commercials per hour. Yeah, we're commercial. I'm Charles Jacobs, the curator director of Hardin County Historical Museum, and that is a mouthful. As you probably know, we have pretty basic historical sites here in Hardin County, although there's a fourth that's going to become the third, and I'll explain that in a moment. That we have the Doherty House right next door. In fact, I just almost reached out to them. And we have the Berniston Farmstead right next to the Hardin County Fairgrounds. And the fourth site, and special interest now, is our schoolhouse, the Beech Schoolhouse, which through the cooperation of our commissioners, among others, volunteers, we're going to be able to move that out to the east of the farmstead this year. So we're getting ready for a major move. So many exciting prospects in line for us. Here comes a commercial. How many of you are members of Hardin County Historical Museums? I know you're all as taxpayers, you're sort of members. But you're really maybe missing out on the show in a way that there's certain benefits to be accrued, so to speak, from membership. But more importantly, your membership, museum's membership helps us to put on programs like this. I would say a better part of the tax dollars, if any of the tax dollars, go towards exhibits and programs. In fact, they go for more or less things necessary. Things like the maintenance and operation, a pittance of a salary for the curator, for instance. Insurance, it helps with the utilities certainly, and a lot of things. But a membership, I'm going to leave right up here near the cookies and all the sweets, and we'll also have coffee here afterwards. Membership, so it's really important. This year's very exciting. We also have a program bulletin here, if you will, which I'll make available. And this is our so-called Nostalgia Night program. And this program series goes back at least a dozen years. And some of you may recall, I believe it was 1987. Wow, can't beat that. 1987 or 1986 for that matter. That we had Dr. Jackson at the courthouse. He initiated the first Nostalgia Night program. We ran the film The Story of Kenton, which is shown on our table. So you're all welcome to take a look at that. Our next program, and I must say I'm at liberty now, I can tell you about it. I can do it by word of mouth when it's going to be. And that program, although we had to be sort of veiled in our description of it in this brochure, because a certain corporation by the name of Walt Disney, a small corporation out there, does not allow us to just publicize this in the local media. But what I can tell you is on May the 18th, we're going to be screening on the big screen the great Locomotive chase. Some of you may remember from a memorable year, 1956, right here, better years. This film is actually about one of our local favorites here, hero, Jacob Parrott. But you will see that this movie created actually a national controversy. That they opened the film with the presentation of the first Medal of Honor, and we have Abraham Lincoln, Secretary of War, standing there. Guess who received the first Medal of Honor? Not Jacob Parrott, but the Reverend William Kenton. You can imagine how that went over with the Parrott family and went over with the people of Kenton. In fact, it became headlines in some national publications. Joseph Parrott is the grandson's fight, if you will, this conflict with Walt Disney. So kind of a David versus Goliath. And I must say, David came out on top. At least came out looking pretty good. So that's well worth seeing. I don't think it's shown on television very much, is it? I know it was on video, and now I understand they withdrawn it from video. So anyway, we can digress only so much. I did want to thank the school, by the way, Kenton City Schools, for sharing this building with us. Mr. Sturgeon, who was just here, was kind enough not only to open the building, but open it during the holidays, so we appreciate that. This is a special building, and that you don't maybe not think of it as being very, very historic, but it is architecturally unique, at least for Hardin County. Anyway, I'd like to begin this evening's program, and it is, I hope you've come for the Little Chicago program this evening. We're going to be telling a little bit about Kenton between the wars, and it's in some ways a repeat of the program we did at the courthouse back in fall, but I've added a few things along the way. I've done a little bit of more research, and I've changed it here and there, so it's not going to be the same old for those of you who attended the first program. So, without further ado, so far, so good.
John Dillinger's father, and I feel like it if John was given a parole or exonerated for what he has done. I don't think he's done near as much as they claim he has, but I think he's given the chance to go straight.
John Dillinger, and found the body had been taken to Election Brothers Hospital. And from there to the county morgue. I went to the county morgue and questioned the government agents who told me that they had shot John Dillinger as he drew a gun in front of the theater. I then searched the body and found from my search that it was John Dillinger, as there was a picture of Evelyn Perchetti, his sweetheart, in the watch.
I'm awful sorry that John got into this trouble, and sorry that it ended up the way it has. We're all dealing with the start. I had a grudge against people who seemed to for getting such a raw deal. I say I'm very sorry this happened. And what the people have told is I tried to raise him right. And he's always been a good-hearted boy.
Already these rats are running for cover, and it's the duty of every law-abiding citizen to help protect them from the hiding place and see that when caught, they are treated what they really are, rats. Now watch them.
John Dillinger, I guess, seems a logical place to start, and a logical person to start when we start talking about Little Chicago, and actually the period between the wars. John Dillinger is a name that's synonymous with ruthless murder and gang violence. As proclaimed on this poster we have here, he was an outlaw, fugitive from justice, and a vicious menace to life and property. One of those rats, I guess. Dillinger has been connected with Kenton, Hardin County, too. It is alleged, we heard last time at our last program, that perhaps he was having his car serviced here in Kenton. It's alleged that he frequented our downtown, gambling and boozing his way through the night. In the spring of 1934, as a fugitive from justice, he was rumored to have sought refuge in the side of marsh. Supposedly, he was expecting the oppressed onion workers to harbor him. Perhaps he planned another strike on the Lima jail over there. In October of 1933, his gang shot Sheriff Jester and liberated Dillinger. Local tradition has it that the gangster fled east through Hardin County, though some of the newswire stories have it going in actually the opposite direction. We do know for a fact that the 3 convicted of murdering Sarber did cause quite a sensation when they came through Kenton. In the spring of 1934, en route to the state penitentiary, they did indeed pass through Kenton, as this article clipping indicates. And in fact, we'll be hearing a little bit later from 2 individuals here this evening that had a brush with history and a brush with John Dillinger, I guess you could say. We'll be hearing from, well, I'm not going to tip my hat too much, right? John Dillinger and his trio of cohorts certainly had connections with a city that was synonymous with organized crime, and that was Chicago. John Dillinger and the other gangsters operated out of the Windy City, and as the little clip you just saw from in fact, it's a video cassette called Brother, Can You Spare a Dime? It's a documentary in the 1930s. John Dillinger was murdered in front of the Chicago Biograph Theater. Chicago, over the years, had earned the reputation as being the Sodom on the lake. Even for the Depression, the criminal Chicago day was horrifying. There were 4 or 5 murders, 7 suicides, and a bombing or 2. Wrote resident historian Stephen Longstreet, "An age with brutal talent was to find that crime paid best when based on illegal brewing of alcohol, drug selling, organized gambling cartels, and prostitution." Chicago was the mid-continental crime center, as well as you can see the mid-continental rail center. This is all important. Or Chicago's iron tentacles, so to speak, stretched north, east, south, and west, and probably a little bit southeast, of course, all the way to our fair city of Kenton. And that, as you can see, we were the hub of the Northwest Ohio, and a direct connection with Kenton, or with Chicago. During the railroad's heyday, trains went back and forth between the 2 cities on a regular basis. I have here a copy of a timetable. Erie. Oh, went up a little bit too hard. There we go. You can see that there were several, both direct and indirect connections, even a Pullman service to Chicago. So Kenton was associated by railway as well as its, I guess you could say, its wickedness to Chicago, and eventually earned the title Little Chicago. It was a title that was on one hand a stigma, but on another hand a cachet, if you will, of distinction, in which one can take guilty pleasure. I think there's those who do that today. Back in 1995, Mike Lackey of the Lima News wrote a column entitled "Little Chicago Title Might Attract Numerous Claimants." He concluded that Kenton, with a rail connection to Chicago, could lay claim to the title of Little Chicago, as could most other cities that were so situated. I did a check of the World Wide Web some time ago, and I found references to a Little Chicago Road in Indiana. There's a Little Chicago nightclub in Iowa, a Little Chicago pizza parlor in Saskatchewan, and even a town, an old mining town, almost a ghost town in Colorado, called Little Chicago. Some, like a restaurant in Virginia, a Little Chicago restaurant, have a gangster theme. And others have a railway association. It's certainly hard to overestimate the importance of the railroads in Hardin County history. This area was connected on the state's first major line, the Mad River and Lake Erie. The train brought to the state the quote-unquote industrial revolution. It altered both the landscape and our cityscape. You should all, I hope, recognize this, where Rogers Agency is located today, but you can see quite a bustling and thriving railway station. Around this station, and actually stations, sprouted hotels, shops, and services. Business, legitimate and otherwise, took place on 3 stories. So when you go around the square, just kind of look up next time and you kind of picture really bustling and booming and thriving, and maybe we'll have John and Eleanor tell us a little bit more about what it was like downtown and how thriving our community was. By 1928, and the time when this picture was first out in the newspapers, Kenton, as you can see, was one booming, bustling, and rollicking railroad center. This is a cartoon by, actually a fairly famous cartoon by Dudley Fisher of the Columbus Dispatch. Last time we spent quite a bit of time looking at this picture. There's all kinds of neat, nifty things going on here. Individuals, of course, you recognize some of the landmarks. We're looking north from the courthouse here, a bird's eye view from the courthouse, the old Kenton Savings Bank up here, and Ullman's, all kinds of whimsical and wonderful things going on here. We have the surprise store over here. One of my favorite images over here is L.S. Bixler, the president of the Kenton Hardware Company, pulling a little cast iron toy along. We're looking at the north side of the north and east side of the square in this particular view. Let's switch our focus a little bit to the south end, and pretty notorious, I guess you can say. The south side, there's all kinds of interesting things. Rather ramshackle down here, as you can see, and it's written in here. It's hard to maybe see from back there, but someone should go in here and start a Greenwich Village. It's sort of a very bohemian type of atmosphere and environment, I guess you could say. Another interesting connection here, the coon dogs up on the roof. Over at the Opera House, they had the offices, the coon dog field trials over there, the national offices. But we'll say a little bit more about the south side as we go along here tonight. Hopefully we'll have some first-hand reports as well on the In the earlier part of the century, railway depots had earned a bad reputation, as you can see in this illustration from a wonderful book entitled, I guess you might even call this, I guess if I use that word book loosely, it's a blood curdler, what they call blood curdler. Fighting the Traffic in Young Girls, 1910. One of these sensational books that you'll find other books like The Sinking of the Maine, which we just celebrated, stories of the Titanic, these sensationalist type of what we might call blood curdlers, earthquake books, and San Francisco Fire, the whole bit, Chicago Fire books, very much. But you can see here, danger, meeting young girls at railway depots is one of the methods of the white slave trader. They promise to take the strangers to their friends, in fact, anything to get them to accompany them. Once in a closed carriage, they are lost. Here. Saloons, pool halls, and even dance halls were attacked as brilliant entrances to hell itself. Where young men buy insanity cheap. Low dives and vice resorts, and have you reflect back on that picture we saw, the cartoon of the south side of the square. It's somewhat similar. These were the places where young men bought insanity cheap. By these definitions, our little Chicago had a share of sin balls. In fact, what's interesting is that we talked about the entrance to hell and all that. One of the things that turned up, and I was doing some completely different research, and I just chanced across this article here. I've inserted this here. Kenton's, let me bring this down. Kenton's Moral Atmosphere. This is from 1906. But a wonderful little article here, and we can get distracted here with another story too, but I'll bring this down up to there. They said some of the ministers who met here in the association took the occasion to say that while there were many things to be regretted about the moral atmosphere of our city, Kenton was no worse than any other city of its size. The South Side came in for a share of criticism, and one minister said that it was responsible for many visitors to Kenton who were here but for a short while getting a wrong impression of our city. In one or two instances, the press of our city was highly commended. I love that. The editor stuck that in there. Commended on its fearless stand at all times for the moral uplifting of Kenton. The services at all churches were well attended, and the discourse quite to the point. What's interesting about this too is that if you read these papers, especially from the turn of the century, they are more or less scandal sheets. That they are the diatribe and they would certainly probably the newspapers of that time would qualify, I guess you could say, for its share of slander. That articles are downright. There's a lot of innuendo and outright accusations in some of these turn of the century papers. And in fact, and what I love this is right next to this column, if anybody caught this, about this President Smith of the Ohio Northern University. It says Ohio State University is rotten as the rest. And says that boys go to the devil. So not only here in Kenton, but I guess at Ohio State, but they're going to the devil. By our definitions of Little Chicago, Kenton had a share of sin halls in the early 20th century. And then I counted actually 9 listings for billiard halls in one early directory. In fact, we've apparently had our problem with not only the saloons and such from an early point in Kenton's history, but other similar, I guess you can say, illicit activities here. And here's just one example. Again, I go all the way back to 1867 here. And it's hard to read here, but Internal Revenue Notice. Notice is hereby given that on the 21st day of December, 1866 in the town of Kenton, I seized and caused to be appraised 1 small copper still, complete, 3 fermenters, 1 patent pump, 1/2 bushel measure, 1 bag ground rye, and there's something, 1 other bushels, so many bushels of rye. But what I love about this is that the Internal Revenue Service was turning around the collector's office and offering this for sale. No IRS agents out there, are there? So there's been so-called illicit activity as well as licit activity. And I mentioned about the billiard halls and the directories. And some of you may be familiar with these. There's J.C. Jordan's Drinking Cafe. That's a great name for a euphemism, I guess, for a saloon. That's actually from a 1890s publication on the bottom there. It gives you a real good idea. But there were quite a few drinking holes, so to speak, here in Kenton. In fact, I was talking to someone who had a relation to the city police chief here, and she had mentioned that there were maybe up to 48 different places here at one time dispensing liquor legally and otherwise during the heyday of Little Chicago. I don't know how you could ever, document, prove that one way or another. Not only the south side of Kenton, there were places like Lake Idlewild outside of town toward north, had its dance pavilion, bowling alley, buildings filled with games of chance, and that came under attack. That we have one there. Well, I'll show you Lake Idlewild. Here's like this. You all are familiar with Lake Idlewild. It's quite a resort here at one time. Quite a bit of dancing, gambling, and entertaining went on out there north of town. Another one of the so-called clubs here in town, which was notorious for not only drink and favors, whatever that means, and good music, among other things. Maybe Mr. Jester can elaborate a little bit on that. But anyway, Charles Lamb, this seems appropriate here. Charles Lamb said that man is, by his very nature, a gaming animal. And I can add that Kenton was his wildlife refuge. Lamb said in his self-published autobiography that it was very, very much a part of our nature to be a carouser and a so-called party animal, if you will. There was a fellow who lived and worked at the Weaver Hotel who wrote a self-published little book, and he reminisced in that book about growing up in Kenton, and he recalled how professional gamblers rented rooms and played cards throughout the night. He said there was always constant activity. And sometimes, actually, from what I understand, too, is that some of these were high rollers who lived high off the hog. There were people that were eating like lobster, Atlantic lobsters, that especially shipped in. There's good evidence that there was gaming going on. We had seen Lake Idlewild. We actually had a roulette wheel used on the south side of the square, which was on display at the Sullivan Johnson Museum, as well as one of the one-armed bandits, the so-called nickel machine. That was at the museum. I've also heard it told how there were numbers rackets here in Kent, and that they were coordinated out of our downtown. The smoking room, which in American parlance became an adjective for the indecent obscene, was represented in Kenton by the Smokehouse. Oh, I better watch how I say that. And the Idle Hour. These were East Side, and there were actually East Side cigar store. There's an East Side cigar store, among others, that were here in Kenton. When I mentioned saloons and bars and watering hose hotels, some of you may recall the Home Bar, Zim's Pickwick Tavern, Miracle Bar, Sunset Inn, and of course some of the speakeasies, and there's one or two vestiges of them left up above the square, in fact. Well, that we don't find many references, at least in the local papers, to houses of ill repute. and that actually there are, if you go to legal journals and legal dockets, the court dockets in the 19th century, you are going to find some references to prostitution here in Hardin County. Prostitution was certainly considered one of the greatest evils of the 19th century, and many reformers wrote about how they were society's worst enemies, the destroyers of families and the nation, and they were even more insidious and ruinous than liquor. And one reformer called on all guides and rulers of the people to make incessant war on the loathsome criminals who prey on the young women and men. Well, we'll hear a little bit more about Kenton's House of Ill Repute. We had talked last time in full about the crusade against immorality and such, how shall I say, illicit operations going on here. I had originally come up with something from the 1930s, and you'll be seeing that momentarily, but you can see that this has actually started probably, if not early, as early as maybe even earlier than 1960. You can see new regulations here. The state was also exerting some pressure that they started to clamp down on gambling houses. And that was as early as the 1900s. But it was sort of sporadic. And with each administration came new policies, I guess you could say, lax or otherwise. But about 1934, they started tightening up things again here. You can see gambling machines, and back in 1920 there was another ordinance about regulating business hours and pool rooms. So during this time, the new administration of FDR, there was a real effort to clean up some of these so-called dens of sin. And this continued all the way into the 50s, 60s. In fact, I've had the opportunity to talk to George Smith about that. He mentioned how they were continuing to clean up Kenton, so to speak, as late as the 1960s. Well, by the 1930s, as you can see, Kenton was looking to establish a new and brighter image, I guess you could say. This article is a good indication of that. It's a little bit hard to read, so last time I've gone back and translated some of this, some of the things I highlighted here. This is the Kenton mayor, Mayor Heron, saying, "Yes, sir, Kenton's the best little city in the United States. It's composed of boosters filled with civic pride and goes in long ways to make a town live, and alive, rather." And this is, again, from the 1930s. He said that Kenton has not followed suit with other cities in becoming spiritually lax. It probably has the largest ratio of church members of any city in the state. So he's more or less echoing some of the things that were said in 1906. There's a really progressive image for Kenton here. There's really a deliberate attempt to break away from that stigma, if you will, that the reputation is with Chicago. Kenton was really portrayed in really lofty ways, as you can say here. This was just about produced from the time of the centennial, but of course you all recognize the scene in the back there as Kenton there with the skyscrapers and everything. But certainly a very progressive image of Kenton where construction is going on, of course industry, and a lot of progress is being made. Building anew, so to speak. I found something very curious here, though, when in 1933, 1934. In trying to break from the sort of image of Little Chicago, what does Kenton do? They adopt the slogan of Chicago, the Century of Progress. Kenton was, Chicago was celebrating its Century of Progress, a World's Fair, exposition. And so what does Kenton do? It's celebrating the Hardin County Centennial in 1933. And here they borrow that slogan, the Century of Progress, for its own centennial. So there's on one hand a deliberate attempt to sort of break out of this Little Chicago mold, but in another way it seems like they're reinforcing that connection between Kenton and Chicago. Well, did Little Chicago perish in 1934 or 1940 or 1945 after the war? Actually, it didn't really just come to an end altogether. That it sort of faded away. But there are still certainly vestiges here and there. That there were certain changes that were made. Of course, the automobile that came here, the highway certainly changed like the railway before it had changed Hardin County history. Forms of entertainment, the smokehouse, the dance hall, and the gambling den, all eventually went their way. And certainly there was probably different entertainments to attract people, and maybe television. I mean, cable television allows us to, how shall I say, enjoy all kinds of entertainments in our own homes, privacy of our own homes. Has Little Chicago completely faded away? Certainly not. I'm reminded of when I first came to Kenton, about 12 years or so, and there was a Little Chicago Fire Company, right? Everybody remember the Little Chicago Fire Company? In fact, I was pleasantly surprised to go down to Jeffrey's Mall South in Springfield, and right along the highway there, I-75, all right outside their building is a Little Chicago Fire Department fire truck, Little Chicago, Kenton, Ohio. So, of course, Little Chicago hasn't died altogether. So next time you're downtown, maybe you can pause just a moment and gaze up longingly, maybe at the third floor, and you might just hear that echo of tinkling glasses, or perhaps even the break of billiards. Thank you very much. We have left time here. We go into our second segment of the program at this point. I've called upon two special guests to be here with us this evening. I thought it would be nice, not only, we have lots of requests for John Jester to return to the podium, so to speak, but we thought that John told more or less the male side of things, if you will, one side of the story and one part of the family story. And this evening that we have here, John's sister, Eleanor, who also happened to grow up in Kenton and has, Eleanor Flesvig has, she shared with me many times some of the vivid memories of growing up here in Kenton, and about the downtown, as well as some of the other perspectives, if you will, on life in Little Chicago. So, Eleanor, would you mind coming up here, and I'll give you the podium, and you can fire away here. I'm going to, in fact, this time I've come prepared because I do have a tape recorder. I hope you don't mind recording your voice as you go along there. All set. It's all set. You're all set to go. I'll turn that off for you.
All right, I'm going to talk about Saturday night downtown things, and I should tell you that I walk still down around the square. And you may see me if you have your work downtown or be downtown, and do my morning walk a lot of times downtown. When I go by all these buildings, it's so different because I can remember when so-and-so, like Bob Ellis's store, and Boyd Geyser's store, and the Woolworth store, and the bar store. I love the bar store. I wish we had it. And things like that. And as I think back on the article I wrote for the Kenton Times in 1983, when we had our sesquicentennial, I wrote an article for the Kenton Times called Around the Square on Saturday Night. And I told Bob how the people in the country look forward to Saturday evening. It was a great event of the week for them. They worked all week on the farm, and the women were busy, of course. And on Saturday afternoon, this could have happened in town too, everybody took a bath. And that was the bath of the week. And they had big wash tubs. Some of you may remember there were big wash tubs. And you had to take a Saturday bath before you could go into town, or even those of us who didn't go into town. That happened to us. Now, you've all heard about the south side of the square. We were all born as children. We couldn't go on the south side of the square with a no-no, because the whole south side were saloons, what they call them saloons, and I guess they were up until they were a Beech. So anyhow, we had what we called programs in the spring in the old opera house. Now, some of you may remember the old opera house before it burned down. And we could go in there for our annual big program that we had. And that's the only time we got on the south side of the square. And then we were a little bit scared, I suppose. Now, the young people today have either, from what I understand, they either have charge cards or they have money. And I've seen plenty of them with money. We didn't have money much. And a lot of these people that I knew as a child told me if they had 5 cents or 10 cents to spend on Saturday night, they were very happy. Because with 5 cents, you could go down to Johnny Peanut's place down by the surplus store. He had a little stand along there. You could go in there for 5 cents or 10 cents. You could buy peanuts, different things. It was called Johnny Peanut. And I thought the name suited me. Now, I don't know whether his last name was Peanut or not. Had to ask my brother. You know, my brother's much younger. He wouldn't remember me. But anyhow, and then there was the Lava Cigar Store. Now, there are some Lavas here tonight. I'm not sure they're related, but they had the Lava Cigar Store, and they had what they called hand-rolled cigars. Now, I don't know, the men here might know. Well, all right, he knows, Dad Gardner. Apparently, they were made here in Kenton, and were they expensive, like a dime? But anyhow, and then Margaret Lava, a person I knew, said that she used to have to cut tobacco on Saturday afternoon. Have plug tobacco, was that to chew? I don't know enough about what that is. They chew tobacco now. See? I don't know too much about the history of tobacco. But anyhow, she told me also that after President Roosevelt came into office, of course, things changed, and we had liquor again, and beer, and she had a really, really nice father, if anybody knew Mr. Long. And she said, I went to my dad
I was just a kid, but I loved her just.
Oh, yes, they did. They had good food, good sandwiches. They really had a nice business there. And like I say, Mr. Lawless was a real nice owner of the business. And so anyhow, these things that I've taken were from this story. And and there was a fellow, now this is way before anybody's time, I think, here, and his name was Fritz Vogel, and he sold fish, and he had a fish market. And I know that my neighbor, when I was 25, she was 50, she told me that the best fish that you could buy was sold at Fritz Vogel's fish market. Alliteration there. And anyhow, I wondered how in those days could you keep fish fresh enough that you could sell it like that? Because after all, we didn't have electric refrigerators, we couldn't have all these things we have today, and yet with ice blocks, they could, I suppose, keep the fish fresh and could sell. So anyhow, Phantasm on the north side of the square was really the place for young people, especially those dating age. And they take their girlfriends over to the north side of the square. And it was the nicest ice cream parlor. It had little tables like you see, these little regular tables, a great big long counter. In there was homemade chocolate that Mr. Phantasm himself made, and I think he ate quite a bit of it. Anyhow, but he was real nice. And they had their own handmade chocolate. Then they had these little tables, and those who had these would go in there, and they had what they called tin rolls. Now, tin rolls was ice cream with chocolate on it, then on top, and then nuts on top of that. So they were 10 cents, and that was kind of expensive, especially when you had a date, you had to pay 20 cents to have 2 dishes of ice cream. Anyhow, Phantasm's was really a nice, nice place. And I want to tell you, when I saw that of the black cat, I've been there. My husband played for at that time, and I, we lived on East Franklin Street. We decided one night we're going out to the Black Cat. We heard so much about it, so we did. We got in there, we sat down, and had food, it was dark, very few lights. All of a sudden we hear this terrible crash, and it's like, let's get out of here. Here somebody had been thrown out and made him so mad that he took a brick and he threw it through the front door, smashed the front door, and we left and we never went back. So that was my one experience with the Black Cat. And then one night, I will tell you this too about it. One night, we were in bed, and in those days, we didn't always lock the door. And anyhow, your skeleton key, anybody could get in. So we were upstairs in bed, and all of a sudden, we heard this banging on our door. I woke Clayton, I said, did you lock the door? He said, I can't remember. I said, there's somebody down there wants in. You have to go down. I wouldn't go down. So he went down, and the door was locked. Here was this woman was screaming, let me in, he's going to kill me. Well, we let them worry about that. We had the door locked. They finally, they drove away. We watched. They never fell out the car. And then another night, they stopped at our next door neighbors at Sobransky's. And in the morning, there was this drunken man there on their porch. And so we had some experiences with the Black Cat. So anyhow, there were a lot of little things like that. Now, I didn't have anything great or that happened in my young life, I guess you could say. But I did write about, I will close by saying that we did write an article about John Dillinger, which you read about, or you saw tonight. And I suppose many of you know he stopped at my dad's home out at the ball game. So we were about dark. Folks had company. And my dad went to the door, and this strange man was standing there. He says to my dad, "Do you know me?" My dad said, "No, I don't know you." But then he said, "No." He said, "No, I don't know you." And so he said, "I got stuck coming down this road here on the west side of the Gulf. And I want to get up on the Harding Highway, it's called 309. I want to get up on the Harding Highway." My dad said, "I could see a woman sitting in there smoking a cigarette," and my father was frowned on that. Some woman in that car with him smoking. So he said, "Well, can I get up through your own private drive?" My dad said, "Yeah." So he goes out and unlocks the gate across there at the barn, and this fella drives away. The next morning it came out on the news that Dillinger had been in Kenton and that he had escaped. And here, my dad never knew until he saw the picture. Then right away knew. But he said, "I'm awfully glad." I said, "No, I don't know you."
A great service to the museums over these many years. Has never let me down, so really appreciate that. I wanted to share, if I may, just a story that was related to me very much along. It's amazing the parallel here. That I was down at a Columbus meeting one time. Actually, it was here in town in a program I was giving, and a woman had mentioned me. She also, her mother encountered John Dillinger. It was almost, they had been living down in Columbus at the time, and John Dillinger was an escapee, what's the word? Fugitive, thank you, from justice. Fugitive from justice. And that this woman had grew up in a farmhouse which was on the east side of Columbus, out where the airport is today. In fact, where the Three Seas parking is out, there used to be a big farmhouse out there. But anyway, a roadster pulled up one day, and a good-looking gentleman got out of the car, and it was Sunday afternoon, I guess. And, he came up to the farmhouse and banged on the screen door, and this woman's mother answered the door, and she recognized who this was. And, very, how shall I say, discreetly, slyly, she took the latch on the screen door and hooked it. And, later, she realized, well, he asked, "Would you sell me some gasoline, please?" You know, he was having a hard time. So, yeah. He said, "No, we don't sell gasoline, I'm sorry." She said, he pleaded a few times and eventually left. But she said, as if screen door was going to stop the public enemy. Well, anyway, on that note, we have our twin bill here. We have the second part of our twin bill, and that is the ever popular John Jester, who, if I may call him forward here to the stand.
Thank you, Charles.
Actually, can I mention about how I was introduced to your name? I found John Jester's name scrolled on a wall, graffiti up on a wall above the bar store. Maybe you can explain that.
That's very easy. I was going to a bar store in Kenton, and I was working at Martin's cafeteria at the time, and they came down and offered me a job. So, and I was making $9 a week at Martin's, 72 hours. But I thought, well, at $12, I'm getting quite a raise. So I went to work for the car show. Well, it was a brand new store at that time, and 1934. And anyway, as kids do, when we're up on the second and third floor, of course, you're always writing something on the wall. So I put on there, John did 1935 or 6 or something. I don't remember what it's there.
36, I think.
How many of you were here when I talked the last time? Uh-oh, I gotta be careful. I've had a cold, so I don't know how long it'll last. But anyways, Kenton in the 20s and 30s, as Charles said, was no different than any other community across the country. After World War I, in the 20s and the early 30s, booze, women, gambling, that was it all over the United States, not just in Kenton. And Kenton was unique because it was on the railroad tracks from north, Chicago. They could come in, it was a very quiet place, and they didn't have to worry, they could stay here, the boys out of Chicago or Detroit. There was no one here to bother them as long as they behaved. The burning stuff is all everybody talks about, of course, was here and was running, among others. And you could gamble in many places in Kenton. And as far as liquor was concerned and so forth, there were a lot of bootleggers, and all the kids knew where they all were all over town, naturally. And of course, a lot of people made home brew in their own basements or in a garage or whatever in those days. And liquor was advertised, as far as that's concerned, in national magazines and newspapers and so forth. So when we talk about Kenton, it was an interesting time, and it was a very, very fun time for most people in Kenton. Even those who didn't get to go on the south side of the square always liked to walk around over on the courthouse side, and they can look over and try to see what's going on over there on the south side. There were a lot of places to go. One of the things you're talking about the Black Cat, okay? My sister did enjoy it. I enjoyed it very much. I'll say. The thing was that in those days, and I've said this in Kenton in the last 10 years, I've brought this up several times, that the kids have no place to go in Kenton. They have no place to go to enjoy or to dance or to talk or to socialize. In those days, no, we didn't have any money. We didn't have much money. We could have a date on a quarter. But we had several places within reach that we could go for the evening and dance and so forth. And we all danced a lot because you could dance for a nickel and a Nickelodeon. The Black Cat, run by Jess Claypool, a man by the name of Jess Claypool. His wife run a beauty shop here in town. His daughter graduated with me in high school. Run the Black Cat, and it was run. Believe me or not, it was really run for young people, young kids. And you go out there, and you could, as I say, you'd have a date on a quarter. You go out there, Cokes were a nickel, the Nickelodeon was a nickel. You get enough kids in there, you'd have that Nickelodeon going from the time you got there until midnight when you shut the doors. And you'd have dancing all evening. And if your girlfriend had a nickel and you had a nickel, then you would spend the rest of it on Coke or potato chips or something. I spent a lot of time out there dancing and enjoyed every minute. And I did not have the experience that she did. She went out there with Clayton. But all the kids, I'll tell you what, most of the kids with kids, one of the things we had to do was dance, okay, or socialize. And you could go out there and do this. You had no problems. Nobody got in trouble. Jess was a pretty good-sized man, and he ran it pretty carefully. You get a fishbowl of beer for a dime if you like beer. None of the kids ever got hurt or anything else. The other two places that they went around here at that time, they could go to the Triangle, which was out west of town. Gone now, of course, it's gone now, but we used to go out there and be able to dance a lot. The other place around here that we used to go to was called the Forest Inn, still there. Now the kids over there, if you wanted to go out there, what you got to do, you got to meet all the girls from Ada, because they came to the Forest Inn or the Triangle. There was nothing, I don't recall at any time that there was anything really ever bad about it. You had a good time. You met a lot of people. if you drank Coke, if you drank beer, that's up to you, and so there was no problem. So I think about those things along with all the other things that I saw. And as I told you before, excuse me, the reason I happen to see a lot of these things, and I'm only going to tell you what I've seen, not what somebody tells me, was because, of course, we lived on a golf course. I was 12 years old when we moved out there, and my dad was a greenskeeper, helped build it. Anyway, I got to know a lot of the people who came to Spring Grove Country Club. Now, at that time, it was a private club. You had to be a member, and Burbanell built it, and then they sold stock to these different people who wanted to buy it. But I got to know a lot of the business people and so forth in Kenton that later on, a little later on, I run into at this place or that place or some other. And they were, I had a couple of my friends, they let you in to look around and so forth and see what's going on. And the other thing was that after I left there, of course, I got out of there and I went to work at the Schoolhouse, and I worked there for 1 month, sweeping the floor and taking care of the pool table. At that time, they played pool, and they played for money. And one of the men here in Kenton at that time, and I will mention his name, and it's all in the family. As far as I'm concerned, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind because I sort of grew up with him. It was Lester Ledman. He was the first beer distributor in Kenton. He also owned the Yellow Cab Company here in Kenton. His office behind down below the Weaver Hotel, right behind where the Pickwick was. That was another place that the kids could go in those days, was the Pickwick, underneath the Weaver Hotel. 17 years old, 18 years old, it didn't make any difference if you wanted beer, if you wanted Coke, if you wanted whatever you wanted you could have. He had a band down there, run it very well. The reason I'm saying some of these things is because in those days, you would think that into the Depression, but in the late 20s, everybody was moving around. Now, they talk about the Purple Gang who came from Detroit and came into Kenton. They did, and they had a place to stay, and they could play cards, they could drink, they could do whatever they wanted to. They had, if they wanted some lady friends, they were available, as in any town. So they did come down here, and they did spend money, and a lot of that money got circulated through this community. Restaurants. I was just, you're talking about restaurants, and so I was thinking about some of that when I worked at Martin's, and there were some restaurants around downtown called Pelkey's. Never heard of it. Pelkey's restaurant. You ever hear of it? Oh, you live right. Okay. And there was Beechers underneath the First National Bank, and there was Reaver's Restaurant, where next to Lavas' cigar store. The Kenton Cafe, which was across the street from Mark's Cafeteria, which, how many of you know where Mark's Cafeteria was? Okay. Right straight across from, next to the theater, right next to the theater in the hotel building. Les Howe run a restaurant on the south side of the square. The home restaurant was on the south side of the square. Kostoff family, who run it for years and years until it went out of business. The Colonial just down the street, that's where we got in one night and they let us go upstairs and watch these guys look like to be a bunch of hoodlums. It probably were, but I never saw so much money on the table in my life playing poker. And we called him Little Joe, he was a Greek. And he ran the table and he took care of the table at the time. And I tried to find out from Paul Apostle. We all thought he belonged to his brother or his first cousin, Tom Apostle, that run a hat cleaning and shoe repair and so forth. But he was not. They was no relation, but they were friends. Charlie Friedel, Dean Friedel, you know Dean Friedel? How many have Charlie? You know Charlie out here? Okay, their dad run this little restaurant for years down there. pickle hamburgers, dead simple soup, and it's where the filling station is. How many of you know where the filling station is? Okay, some of you don't. Okay. And of course then there was the St. Nicholas Hotel that had food, and of course where I worked at Martin's. A couple things that we don't, you know, all during this time, and as I told you before, when we used to have to go to New York with Chicago a couple times a year and work for a week, and sometime or other, either don't make any difference. Some guy walk in and find out my Kenton and say, "Is the pretty stuff still there?" You know, and I said, "No, you know, lived in Chicago." And he would talk about how they get on the train and come down to Kenton. The thing is that there were a couple other things in Kenton too. We talked about a little bit about Lake Idlewild. Okay, if we had a dive, we'd go swim. If we didn't, we had to go to High Banks or out here at Red Cottage. I don't know whether you ever heard of it or not, but Red Banks was free. It was a puddle, but all the fellas could go, and the girls could go. And the girls didn't wear bathing suits. They just wore their slip. Yeah, they jump in and swim too, some of them. It cost them. And if you saved your money, you'd go to Lake Idlewild. But then we had proms out in Lake Idlewild. High school proms were out there. In the summertime, in the fall. They had what we called at that time chautauquas. Now this was all week. They would have all different programs. And as a Boy Scout, I got to help park cars. You jump on the running board. Those days you had running board. You jump on the running board. You tell them where to go. You know, you're only 10 years old or 9 years old, whatever it was. And they had baseball games, and they had a lot of things like that. And then also, at that time, they had a place in Kenton called Bell's Park. At the end of Lake Street, Cecil Arndt lives there. He married a Bell girl, Martha Bell. But they used to have picnics in the summertime in Bell's Park, and they had tables, chairs, things like this out there. We forget these things sometimes when we're talking about all the other things. Now, a couple things. One of the things that Kenton is noted for, not anymore, but was, this was the home of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. Now, when I was a kid, we lived up here on Cary Street. Every summer, it was run, the man who organized it was W.W. Durbin. W.W. Durbin owned the South Company. He was a really important Democrat person, and he was high in the Democratic Party, not only in the state of Ohio, but in the national, and he ended up, if you would look on some bills from back in the early 30s, you would see that he was treasurer of the United States at that time. You know, they always get to sign their name. Now we have Marion Withrow from Marion, Ohio, who is our treasurer. But he was the treasurer. He was the head of the International Brotherhood of Magicians. Every summer, out there in the park, right out there in the backyard, he set up a tent in July or August, and he brought in magicians from all over the world. Now, these people were the most famous ones in the world. And I remember this: Houdini, Thurston, Emilio, and Blackstone. And Thurston, I got to see, we're trying to get in, he looked like, any of you remember Belly Lugusa? This guy looked like that, I'll tell you what. He was different. But these were famous people, and they came to Kenton every summer. Every summer, W.W. Durbin had a committee, and they put on shows. And most of the shows was for each other. For this guy, they'd show off, what he knew better than this guy, and so forth, trying to fool each other. But Kenton was really, really famous at that time. Now the other thing, a couple other things. We used to have circus here every summer. Hagenbeck Wallace was a big circus, okay? They come into Kenton, and we go down there at 6 o'clock in the morning and at the Piper Show lot, where REA is now. Okay? They would start at dawn almost, set that things up. And we try to get a job watering the elephants or something. Anyway, But they were here every year, and that was a big day because they had the parade uptown, from Farmer Show uptown, around the square, the elephants, the beautiful calliope. You know, they had it all, and it was a big circus, and it was here in Kenton every year. What do I say? Other thing that they had down there at Farmer Show every year was called the Kinsey Comedy. Now this was some women that put on plays 7 nights. They set up a tent, and these women put on these different plays every night. And for 10 cents or 15 cents, you go and see Kinsey Comedy plays. Believe me, the people used to go. What I want to say is, all of you know this, and I'm not going to bore you. I hope I don't bore you too much. But all this was before we had television. Yeah, you're right. You guys have read this before we had. We were before television, before penicillin, the pill, polio shots, antibiotics, you know, Florida supplies. We were before baton, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You know, when we were in college, pizzas, Cheerios, frozen orange juice, instant coffee, McDonald's were unheard of. We thought fast food was what you ate during lunch. In our day, smoking cigarette smoking was fashionable. Grass was mowed, coke was something you drank, and pot was something you cooked in. But anyhow, we were before coin vending machines, jet planes, helicopters, interstate highways. In 1930, made in Japan meant junk, and the term making out referred to how you did on an exam. In our time, there were 5 and 10 cent stores where you could buy things for 5 and 10 cents. For just a nickel, you could ride a streetcar, make a phone call, buy a Coke, buy enough stamps to mail 1 letter, 2 postcards. You could buy a new Chevy Coupe for $600, but nobody could afford it. And it was a pity too because gas was 11 cents a gallon. So we were not before the difference between the sexes was discovered, but were before sex changes. We just made do with what we had. So you know. What we have to remember here is the fact that we didn't have all the things they had today. So, as I say, dates. When we went on dates, I didn't have a car. We walked. You know, we walked. We pick up the girl, we get out, and the biggest deal was the Kenton Theater when they built in 1927. Was to get down there because the lights were beautiful, the chaser lights around and everything. In downtown Kenton, my God, you know, lit up the whole town. Everybody. And the clouds moved up above, you know, and the stars in the ceiling. And it was absolutely, boy, if you could go there, cost you a quarter. You had to have 50 cents, and then you had to have another 50 cents, really, because you wanted to go next door to Martin's cafeteria afterwards in order to have a Coke and talk. And some cases, but anyhow, the other thing I'd like to tell you about Kenton. We talked a little bit about the golf course, and this is where I got to meet all these people, older people, business people, and so forth that I knew later. But in the 20s, when Burbanell built that golf course in 1927, private club. Now I worked there. I went up because we lived there, and I go up and help out, clean up, do anything the golf course. You didn't care. There weren't any laws in those days about anything. So anyhow, I go up there. But we had in Kenton, Ohio at that time, you had what was considered society, real society. Now, when they had their dances, and I'm out there helping out, the people came to the dances, tuxedos, the men. The ladies came in formals to every one of those shindigs that they had like that, those parties. And you did not come in a dark suit from that time. You came in a tuxedo. And I always thought, I'm a kid, so I always thought, boy, you know, I'd sure like to grow up one of these days and have a tuxedo like that and so forth. But boy, they look good because I go to the movie house, and you know, those old actors, you know, they're always in a tuxedo, you know, showing off and so forth. And I thought, boy, I'd like to have that. But really, in those days, that is true. I don't want to bore you guys too much. But the other thing we had at Kenton, Hart County Army. Now, we're trying to restore it for the time. But if you go back to the 20s and the 30s, Hart County Army was the center of a lot of social activities. A lot. Every Friday night we played basketball up there. After the ball game we had a dance. Local band, everybody danced, all the kids danced, so grown-ups, whatever wanted to. You had the high school playing ball there. You had the Grange teams. They had Grange teams all over, to all your Granges around here, a team, and they played ball there. You had some semi-pros, coon hunters from Dunkirk, and then the pros, they played ball there. You had church leagues at that time. Morgan Grove, Mount Victory Methodist, they had one from Ada, I can't remember their name, and these different churches, they all had basketball teams. And they play basketball. It cost you a dime to get in. Now if you had a friend up at the back door on the east end, and you had a friend up there, and he was up there, and you could get in for nothing. Get the door open. Get in for nothing. And all this was going down. You talk about Little Chicago, no doubt about it. Kent didn't have to take a backseat to anybody when it came to all the things that I was talking about. They were right there. Business was great in this community. Alan says the streets on Saturday night were packed with people. The A&P at the Kroger stores didn't close till maybe 10:30, 11 o'clock, whenever the last person came in to get some groceries and go home. I worked in A&P for a while for Lawrence Bowl on Saturday to help him out. The store closed at like 11 o'clock, whenever the last one was, get the last one out of there. But it would take you an hour and a half to get cleaned up, so for $2 you got 12 hours, so 14 hours. And this is true all the way. Now, what I want to say is this. In Kenton, at that time, I said this before, you had very few problems with the people. I don't care whether they were on the south side of the square, the north side of the square, where they were. You had very little problem. I became aware back then that, I'm pretty young, so I have to be careful what I say in front of my sister. Anyway, as far as the police department or the sheriff department is concerned, they let you go, they let everybody go, as long as they run it, what do you want to say, clean, as long as they run it right. If you had trouble, you're in trouble. Go ahead and do it. Keep to yourself. You don't splash all over town and all that. Just do it. At that time, also, we had a judge who enjoyed it. He enjoyed a lot of the things that were going on in Kenton, and he felt the same way. Now, I'll be very frank with you. When he left office, and of course I left Kenton in 39, so, but anyhow, when he left office, and a new one came in, and the judge said, we're going to clean up Kenton. And that's exactly what he did. But during the 20s and the 30s, and I want to say, some of the bootleggers that I met at the bar store. These people were very nice people. They were very nice people. They were, believe me, a lot of them were trying to make a living for their families. Okay? They weren't doing this because some of them didn't really do it because they wanted to. Some of them done it because they had to. They had to find a way to make some money for their families. There was never any problem with them. They never created any problems in any way, shape, or form. And the thing is that when I was down in Martin's, as I told you before, it isn't any different than the girls from the Marine Stump, who I worked 7 at night till 7 in the morning. At 2 o'clock in the morning, a lot of times they would come in and and there's only two of us working. Dick Huey and I worked the night shift. I waited tables, and he done the cooking. And they would come in to eat with their husbands, and come in and eat. Absolutely, you couldn't ask for any nicer people to come into your establishment than those people. They were neat, they were clean, they were nice. There was nothing out of the way in any way, shape, or form. Believe me. I was always, and not only that, they always gave me a tip. But anyhow, in the movie, how many of you saw, I happened to see the movie they run the other night on Channel 12? They run the old Kenton movie. You didn't see it. I told Charlie the other. Anyhow, in there, it shows Dr. Jackson coming to Kenton and so forth. And it shows a girl by the name of Helen Lash. She was a tall, dark girl. She and her sister Steve came here. And she was a beautiful girl. But she always worked me a little bit because she'd always come in about 1 o'clock in the morning, Martin. And she wanted a Coke, or she always wanted a lot of service. She wouldn't give you any tips. You know. So anyhow, one morning about 2 o'clock, I don't know, I wasn't feeling too good or something. She came in and she came back and sat down. She ordered a Coke, so I went and got the Coke. Brought it back. She says, "Where's the ice?" I said, "Well, did you want some? I certainly do." So I went. And I started turning around. She said, "Aren't you going to pour it for me?" I looked at her and I said, "What?" Well, I did. But I got nervous. And you know what? She got part of the Coke right there. Never asked me again. But anyhow, the meeting place, and Aaron showed you the cafeteria. It was the place, believe me, where people came. Everybody came to Mark's cafeteria at some time. We had Greyhound buses in the middle of the night that you stopped there to eat. When they had a high state football games, you could rest assured that by 6 o'clock, you always had to keep some extra people on there for a while. By 6 o'clock, we kept the steam table open so that they could feed it, because they came in, people living up in Northwest Ohio, they came this far to eat and then going home because it was well known. Kenton had a lot of things going for it, had a lot of wonderful people, and you know what? Believe me, folks, Kenton was still full of a lot of wonderful people, and this county's got a load of them if we just knew who all they were. Hey, I'll quit. Thank you.
Certainly counted among the luminaries. Thanks very much. You know, while you were talking here, I just wanted to add as an appendix, so to speak, one footnote to this whole. Today is President's Day, and one individual's name who hasn't come up in these two programs, who's gone through two programs talking about Little Chicago, and this is President's Day, but a gentleman who was no stranger to Kenton, and in fact liked gambling, and liked to do, how shall I say, the entertainments and whatever, and that was Warren G. Harding. And that we know that Warren G. Harding did stay in Kenton. In fact, there's a home, I think, called on North Detroit Street, is that right, John? Where he came to stay during the summer, and they actually built a porch, a sun porch, or a summer, what's the word? Porch, a screened-in porch, a screened porch for, if possibly would have been Congressman Harding at that point, President Harding. Another interesting little anecdote about it. It seems very common to talk about Warren G. Harding anyway, with all the sort of things going on, innuendos and whatever in Washington, but Warren G. Harding, he had quite a few friends, and one of his female acquaintances was Carrie Phillips, and Carrie Phillips actually has a Kenton connection. Carrie Phillips' father was, I understand, a resident of Kenton before he moved off to Marion and set up shop there. If you're interested in that side of the shadow of Blooming Grove, so to speak, there's a book by that title, which is an interesting book. There's no one here from the Marion County Historical Society. I would probably not be allowed back in Marion County. But I thought it was noteworthy mention. But anyway, we have maybe any questions. Maybe it's a good time to take a break. We have some refreshments, some coffee up here, and our speakers will be available here. And we all invite you back for our next program, which will be on May the 18th and next South night at the Courthouse. We'll be running Walt Disney's great Locomotive chase. We're going to actually sort of critique the movie afterwards and have a lot of fun with that movie, I think. And Boo and Hiss maybe throughout the movie. But we also invite you March 7th. We're going to be serving refreshments again. We're going to be having the Doherty House at Sullivan Johnson Museum open for our site. I really appreciate everybody coming out during this holiday and sharing their evening with us. And you're welcome to say to help yourself with membership brochures, schedule events, and help yourself.
And the coffee is decaf, so it won't keep you long.
Where was out near B and J or this? Not right now. It's out north side of the north side. Right after